Hello, everybody. I'll give you a moment to connect to sound. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1125th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe Stagaman, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the extreme pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Imelda Cajipe Endaya, Eugenie Tsai, and CJ Salapare. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Guests, plural, and host. For 5 decades, Imelda Cajipe Endaya has devoted her artistic and activist practice to a broad spectrum of socio-political issues in the Philippines, including labor, migration, reproductive health, climate collapse, and more. She co-founded KASIBULAN in 1987, a feminist collective of women artists with the intention of fostering grassroots change. In 2022, she was the subject of the retrospective Pagtutol at Pag-Asa, Refusal and Hope at the Cultural Center of the Philippines. Eugenie Tsai is a curator and writer based in New York. For 16 years, she was the John and Barbara Vogelstein Senior Curator, Contemporary Art at the Brooklyn Museum. During those years, she shaped the contemporary collection and organized around 40 loan and collection exhibitions. And our host today, CJ Salapare, is a research associate at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Prior to that, he was a curatorial assistant at the Whitney Museum of American Art, where he worked on Edges of Ailey. His research spans the fields of Philippine diaspora, art historical method, and performance studies. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to CJ to get us started with all my gratitude to CJ, Eugenie, and Imelda.
Great. Hello, everyone. Thank God it's Friday. It's a dreary one at that, but hopefully we bring some light into your days today. I guess one question, is the PowerPoint ready for discussion? Okay. Um, Firstly, thank you all for coming. And I wanted to thank the Brooklyn Rail team for setting things up so smoothly as usual, and also to the most esteemed guest here. So Imelda is visiting from the Philippines for her first solo show in many years here in the States at Silverlens, which just opened yesterday. And Eugenie is, a pillar of Asian American art, and I think has really laid the groundwork for how we approach that diasporically today. So I think one thing I really want to emphasize here is this kind of meeting of minds and histories, right? And what it means to have this coordinate of an encounter that feels really generative. You have Imelda, who is a kind of linchpin or a kind of core pillar of post-war Filipino art history, someone who's borne historical witness to, I think, the key events that have defined the Philippines and its kind of local and global resonances, namely the Marcos dictatorship and I think the Philippines' imbrication within larger systems of global capitalism. And she's singularly forged a way of thinking, a way of creating, and a way of positioning the Filipino woman and this feminist subjectivity within local and global circles. And we have someone like Eugenie who has done similar work here in the States through her work with Godzilla or at the Whitney and at the Brooklyn Museum. And so I think this is really a moment to see how both of them came together, right? And what came from that first meeting or that first encounter. So I guess just in terms of a run of show, we'll be discussing specific artworks first that are featured in the Silverlens Gallery exhibition, and also interspersing a discussion of, I think, key chronological moments in Imelda's own biography, but also in terms of a larger Filipino history. So for the audiences who are unaware of what's happened or what is still happening, it at least provides you with a primer, right? And gives you a sense, some kind of the historical bones to attach some meat onto. And then from there, we'll talk more about the larger exhibition and the experience of being in that space. So with that, I think my first question for Eugenie and for Imelda is, how did this relationship come to be? When was the first moment that you saw or knew of each other's work, and when did you first meet?
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Chloe and CJ. Um, it is a pleasure to be here this morning with you, CJ, and of course with you, Imelda. Uh, I Imelda and I met last fall. As you said, CJ, I've had a long-standing interest in art of the Asian diaspora, and that grew into a larger interest in Asia. But up to this point, my experience had been mostly with East Asian art, and I was very interested in looking beyond East Asia, um, Southeast Asia, South Asia. And so when this opportunity to work with Imelda presented itself, when the gallery invited me to work with Imelda, it was that perfect opportunity. So we met on Zoom and had our introduction to one another. Um, and then I went to Manila last fall and met Imelda in person, spent an entire day at her studio going through, you know, many, many works. She very kindly allowed us to basically unwrap everything and look at everything. I saw some work at Silverlens, and also I saw examples of her work at the Manila Metropolitan Museum and the National Collection. Um, so that was my very intense introduction to Imelda and her work. Then I came back to the States and just let it all kind of, I tried to absorb it. It took me a long time to absorb and process everything I had seen. Um, Imelda, do you think that that's my side of it? So I don't know if you have further thoughts about that.
Of course, I was very happy that Silverlens selected to show me, and Isa said she needed a curator, and I was happy for that. The gallery chose Eugenie Tsai, and I looked her up. We haven't met before, but I saw she had experience at my favorite museum, the Brooklyn Museum, because it had a feminist collection. That was really, really something for me. So it was such an honor to have Eugenie welcome into my house and look at my work too. Yeah, I'm very happy about that.
And I think that sense of meeting in your home, meeting in domestic quarters, right, feels like such an apt segue into this first work. It's the earliest work in the show, and it's something of a kind of hinge or juncture for you, Imelda, right? So for some key dates in 1965, that's when Ferdinand Marcos gets elected into office.
Yeah.
And eventually, 7 years later, or 7 years later in 72, that's when he starts to institute martial law.
Mm-hmm.
So a kind of ironclad economic and political ruling that is often American coded, right? Or that is has a kind of tricky, complex relationship with American imperialism. I won't go in. We can keep going backwards or invoking these kind of successive centuries of foreign intervention. But I think from there, you have something in you have this work in 1982 that I think speaks to these layers of time, right?
Yeah.
You have this scene that's unfolding in three different vignettes that
Mm-hmm.
are actually bookended by three sets of sawali or kind of woven bamboo that if correct me if I'm wrong, were taken
Yes.
from home, right?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. In 1982, that was uh, maybe 10 years after Marcos had declared martial law. But I think he was trying to show that it was such a friendly dictatorship, but actually not. There were so many hidden things of human rights violations. And at the beginning, you could see all the military around, but then he managed to hide the military. But you know that everything is being watched. And in 82, there were big project by the dictatorship. That was the Bataan nuclear plant, which had billions of budget given by the government. And we thought that we really didn't need that nuclear plant at all because there was so much poverty around. Instead, it could be used giving jobs or some other economic benefits that would be for the good of the lower social class. So that was the thing that was happening when I was painting this. It was actually an expression of anxiety over a nuclear, what do you call this, meltdown or something like that. It's like an end of the world scenario. And I was a young mother in 82 with 3 young children. And at that time, I was really one of isolated mother, wife, uh, being anxious. So I'm looking out the window and wishing for a wider perspective and a wider involvement in the social, political decision making in my country, because I worry about the future of the next generation. And well, the materials here I use are canvas. I'm very colorful in painting because if you go to the Philippines, you'll notice that things are really so bright and colorful, whether it's rainy or sunny, but it's mostly sunny. And the sun is so stark that fall on the colors of the environment. And well, in my place, in my home, I have a bahay kubo or a nipa hut, a bamboo house, where I play with the children. And sometimes I sleep there, rest there, take a nap, or paint there. I bring my canvas to that nipa hut. And when I did that, I saw that my colorful canvases look very good beside those Sabali bamboo windows. So I began to tear apart the windows themselves and remove those parts of that nipa hut and combine them with my painting. And this is what happened. I just added one thing to the other. So may bukas pa inay, there's still a tomorrow. I always want to instill some hope in spite of like an end of the world scenario. That's why I placed the growth of green over there. Yes, if you ask me questions, I can talk some more.
Well, I think one I want before talking about the figures, right? Or your approach, and I think the state in your practice. I really want to think about the your painterly treatment that's happening here, both in terms of the background being a kind of atmosphere, being a kind of fomenting or bringing forth something invisible, right? Here it's the specter of annihilation, of apocalypse, of the kind of nuclear plant, right? And all of these other structural forces. But it's so interesting here how as I was looking at this work, the two little girls on the right, you have them dressed in traditional garb, but the way that you've rendered their tops is so akin to these more silhouetted and kind of amorphous figures that almost seem to be hovering between a kind of atmosphere or background or a kind of oblivion into a kind of self-formation.
Yes.
More about these different types of treatment in your work, Imelda.
I've always been thinking of the woman finding her self-identity, because so much of women who are isolated are need self-empowerment. So as she tries to develop herself, tries to define herself, she has to look backward at history. That's why I have that historical woman, the mother in front, and the children dressed in our national clothing of the past. I'm trying to establish my roots of national identity. Before that, before this phase, I was into much historical research about who were the indigenous peoples of the Philippines before we became even called Filipinos, because Filipino came only during the turn of the century. We were really isolated, island peoples, and we became Filipinos as a nation, still is not a nation, I should say, still struggling to be a nation because of colonialism of 400 years and 50 years of Hollywood. So it's continuing to define ourselves so that we can uh, come from a position of strength.
Mhm.
Yes.
And I think part of that position of strength and is that sense of historical excavation, right? Really understanding who precedes you and who will be kind of alongside you, right? I think the sense of hearkening toward the future is so important in your work, and I think is prescient because you literally establish a groundwork for people archivally, art historically, discursively, et cetera, to make something happen. And so I think in this moment, in 1982, who were the other kind of thinkers or artists or other women you were really kind of who were really shaping you in this moment?
Oh, you mean other artists?
Yeah.
Well, other artists of my period were, for the women, of course, I had the KASIBULAN. I had Brenda Fajardo and Ofelia Helvesontiki and Julie Luch. We were marching on the streets together in those times during the time of protest up to 1986. And yeah, that was 82 to 86. We were marching separately, but often saw each other there on the protest. And pretty soon, in 87, we founded our women's organization, the KASIBULAN. It means kababaihan sa sining at bagong sibol na kamalayan. In English, it would mean women in the arts with an emerging consciousness. And well, we researched about our colleagues and we saw that it was mostly men who were who were the artists who were being shown and being watched. And the women, we researched and found out that we had just a 50-50 proportion of men and women, but the women were not being shown in the galleries or publicly. So we thought that we really did have to organize to widen the exposure and hear the voices of the women who are not heard.
Of course, of course. And I think there's a two-part question that I want to ask here. And Eugenie, I'd also love if you could chime in. I think you had laid out a story so beautifully where you're outside and you're looking out the window, and instead of trying to recreate the window, you take the literal apparatus, the architecture, right, and bring it into the work. So there is the sense of verisimilitude, the sense of palpable or undeniable reality or lived experience that I think forms the coordinates of your work. But you also, I think there's a quote where you mention how in this period, you're walking out into the streets, other artists, other musicians, other writers, other poets, etc. They can't just sit in the studios. They're agitated and galvanized and need to be active out in the world, right? So I guess how does that sense of inside and outside, right? That interconnectedness or inseparability feel, or kind of what was it like kind of having that porosity, Imelda? And I think Eugenie, what is that like in terms of your own understanding of like feminist movements here in the States, right? Or other forms of social activism, etc.
Is it I? Well, the kind of activism that we did was we had workshops. For example, in Paete, there are craft workers who make paper mache as a livelihood, and we had workshops with them. And we tried to create newer forms, just like tree planting and breastfeeding, which were roles of the mother, but it shouldn't isolate the mother, but also expand her role into the social life of the country. And on the other hand, with KASIBULAN, we also had monthly and quarterly meetings where we discussed our biographies and our involvements with the community, and we made sewing and painting in individual works. But then when we come together, we sew the pieces together until at the end of the year, we would have a really long tapestry that could be hanging from one corner of the museum at the Vargas and to the other end of the museum. Yeah.
Well, one thing I thought about when I was learning about your life is your ability. I found myself thinking, this is an issue that women face today, and I thought, okay, this is an issue that women have faced historically. Here you are, an artist, a mother, a community activist, and you seem to move very organically between those roles and to do them all and to do them all so well. And I thought, I just found myself thinking, how did you do that? In visiting your studio, which is in your home, I was struck by the integration of your art and your domestic life, and that they seemed again to be one entity, and that your art grew very much out of your lived experience in terms of the content and also the materials. But I still found myself in awe that you had found this solution that perplexes women and continues to perplex women, how to do it all, how to be a good citizen, how to be a good parent, and how to be an artist or professional. So do you have any advice to impart to younger artists, women, professionals who are seeking to do everything?
Well, I'm really so instinctive in what I do. And I guess just like a bird that naturally wants to sing, I have to paint every day. And I'm also very aware of what's happening in my surrounding, which might affect my family and my community. And yeah, I have to integrate everything that is within my experience. For example, during the Marcos protests, I would even bring my my well, one at a time, my child to the rally in the streets protesting. My firstborn, who's now 53, would remember her coming with me all the way to the EDSA streets in protest, and we were marching. Well, sometimes I look back, wow, how did I have the courage enough to even bring my kid and myself? And there were tanks there on the street who were threatening to, just do some act of official violence. But maybe because I pray and have faith, and that keeps me strong. And I believe there's so much good and so much strength in each one of us that we have to inculcate and encourage, and together the good will prevail. That's the kind of faith I have. Yes.
Well, I'm so struck by you bringing up this sense of faith, right, or piety, both in terms of its religious understanding, like the Philippines being a predominantly Catholic country, et cetera, but also a kind of faith in terms of futurity, right? And one of the ways that we can see these images, like this one, right, that is a kind of syncretism of your self-portrait with like the Madonna, images of the Madonna, right, the Black Madonna, etc., is really thinking about the kind of theological dimension of an image, it as a kind of icon, the sense of presence and immediacy, but also its sense of an afterlife, right, hearkening towards something else.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, how does that kind of religious symbolism or kind of, I guess, that faith in the image play out for you? Is it something that you see in your day to day, Imelda, or that you carry with you?
Yes, I carry that with me. I was brought up by very religious people, like my grandmother and my mother were deeply Catholic, and they sent us to Catholic schools. And when we go to the hometown, we have Holy Week processions. And this one in the image is the main religious icon that was embedded in my mind. And it's image of a sorrowful mother with a broken golden heart. And well, I grew up having this image, but then I also questioned this image that the sorrowful mother shouldn't be sorrowful, but should be doing something here on earth, and get angry at one time, and you have to do something. Like this one, uh, she's supposed to be in tears and just suffering also with the sun. And the devotees of the image would have handkerchiefs with them. The handkerchiefs would be represented by these textile pieces on the below her garb. And the devotees would wipe the image, and after the handkerchief have touched the image, the devotee would wipe her body as though to receive the blessings of the Madonna, and also to receive some healing where you have pain in your body. And this time, uh, as I said, the Dolorosa should be something who is more defensive and would like to fight back for rights in this world. Well, I have the black Nazarene symbol there at the back with the hand broken down, because beneath these figures, beneath the clothing which are embroidered, you see in my hometown, the clothing of the Virgin Mary is also embroidered with silver or golden threads and with beaten metal, and only the head and the hands will be sticking out. They're like just endings, figure endings, and beneath are empty skeletons beneath the, yeah, but we have to put flesh in our strength and fight for our rights in this earthly life before we even think that the Catholic teaching is that as though you just accept the suffering and have your reward in the next life, and that it shouldn't be that way. We have to seek social justice always in this life. Yes.
Of course, of course. And I think what I'm hearing here too is the sense of, I think, expectations or certain pressures of like what a woman or a mother or an artist or an activist is supposed to be, and how for you at least it seems like a space pushing back on those or expanding what those could be or bringing them together or just reconfiguring the container is that form of agency. It's how you are able to find a sense of empowerment, right? Uh,
Yes.
and I think, if I may, I think something else, there's this sense of interconnectedness that feels like a through line in this conversation. And I can't help but think about certain terms in Filipino psychology, right? The sense of loob or the sense of kapwa, right?
Mhm.
Kaisahan quite literally means one. And so in the very linguistic structures of Tagalog or other dialects, there's always this sense of everything being interconnected. And you
Yes.
see that so powerfully in this work, right? This
Yeah.
quite literal blossoming,
Yes.
the kind of floral forms that kind of almost fractal-like appear. And then you have the doubling from the silhouette and then the actual painted portraits. How, I guess, how have people explored these kind of psychological undercurrents or positioned you vis-a-vis, I think, these larger frameworks, Imelda?
Yeah, you're right about that self and the other, or kapwa. I don't know if that's unique in the Philippines, but the kapwa is so innate because when you have to think of yourself, one also has to think of another. That's why even somebody so poor and you give food, this give food to a child, the child will always say, "Oh, I'll save one for my brother or my sister, and for my mother, I will have to share this." It's very instinctive that they do that. And I think that is a kind of strength that I find in our people. Uh, yeah, the Kapwa thing. And if I may look back, even our early suffragists in the 1930s, they started coming together. The women started coming together because of giving milk, encouraging milk. The Filipinos are not a milk drinking people, but maybe they breastfeed, but when there's none in the breast, they won't care at all. So the early feminists founded their organization on mothers giving milk to children and at the same time being able to vote because we were also not allowed to vote. That was American period already. So that's a kind of historical strength that I look back to uh, in the Philippines. Yes.
And then I think with that, you talk so much about roots, right? Like what actually sinks in or what the foothold, right? Historically, visually, interpersonally, that allows you to make your work. But what's interesting is after 1986, I mean, it's all crystallized in 1986 with Marcus's deposition, with the rise of Corazon Aquino, the
Mhm.
EDSA revolution, right? That's
Mhm.
optimism hitherto unseen. But then
Mhm.
it seems like in the 1990s, if we could skip to the sculpture work, in I think it's 1995,
Oh, yes.
roots turn into roots, right? We start thinking about the Filipino diaspora, especially
Mhm.
in terms of all of the Filipinos pushed out, or whether it be for political exile or for economic necessities, right? And
Mhm.
that's something that is so kind of present in this period of your works, right? Can you talk more about that shift between the root in the kind of vegetal botanical sense to the root in terms of diasporas?
Mhm. Yeah. In the 90s, well, before that, it was the men who left the country to work and support their families back home in the Philippines. And they mostly went to the Middle East. But then when the buildings in the Middle East were done, the men came home and there was not enough work. So it was the women in the 90s who expatriated to find work. And if you look at this piece, the wife is a DH, which is here on the screen. It's a story about a personal friend, actually. She lived close to my house, and all the time she was this isolated wife and mother with 5 children, living her life so isolated, just serving, being housewife and serving the husband who was quite oppressive. But then one time she just said, "This is enough. I have to have something for myself." So she whispered goodbye to her children, didn't say goodbye to the husband, and she fled home. She went to, well, nearby Hong Kong. and tried to find work there. And true enough, because she had not much background of other things to do, even if she went to school, the work that she found was again to be a domestic helper. Well, of course, I want to inculcate dignity of labor, but I thought that women should find work that would fulfill herself. And well, showing the elements here, she's still protesting. That's why there's a clenched fist on the left-hand side from our view, right hand from the woman's view. And if she has clenched fist over her traditional vest, traditional lace vest there. And on the left, she continues to be working with her rags and implements of work at home. And there's a religious icon again there at near center. It's the image of our Virgin of Antipolo, Virgin of Good Voyage, because every time traveler would leave the country, he would first go on a pilgrimage to the Antipolo shrine and pray for a good voyage and success of the trip. And of course, all her implements are there. And well, to her tragedy, but she has to save herself. When she tried to escape this kind of work, she just had to accept that it was the only work she could get. And that was rather frustrating. But we had to show the condition. I want to prick the mind of the viewer to realize the condition. And art cannot solve the problem, but a viewer who sees it might be provoked to solve the problem.
Exactly, exactly. You know, this sense of a layered or a complex recognition. Like the body is here, or certain parts of the body, but not necessarily in the ways that we expect. The trappings of work or a certain kind of industry are here, but totally recontextualized. I think it's so fitting and a kind of fitting extension of your own work, ways of kind of bringing in or collaging or assembling different types of materials. And
Mhm.
Eugenie, I'm so curious. This is a work that you placed very frontally at the gallery. What was your first impression with seeing this work, and why did you want it to be a kind of entry point for people here in New York?
Um, it is such a striking work, and it is um, probably the only. It's not quite freestanding, but it's like it is a largely three-dimensional work. So I really wanted the entrance to be impactful. I wanted people who were walking past the gallery to see this and be drawn in. But it also encapsulates Imelda's practice in many ways. And also, when I first saw it, I responded very much to the materiality of the work, as I did with the paintings as well, or I'm going to call them the two-dimensional works. So yes, I just thought it would be very impactful and be an introduction to the idea of the Filipino woman in this form, in the diaspora. I mean, here we are in the United States. Yeah, very fitting. I know this was shown at Asia Society in a large group show in the 90s. I saw the show, and I know it's part of a larger installation that's no longer extant. But I looked at the pictures, and it kind of reminded me of the impact of that show, which is one of the first kind of global Asian shows in New York. And of course, in the 90s, when there was so much opening up of to other parts of the world, art from other parts of the world.
And I think with the advent of these, I think this more hemispheric or global eye towards Asia, right? In terms of spatializing it into exhibition formats, what were some of the other shows that were really formative for you that helped you see not only a Filipino presence, but I think this sense of a kind of collective region, right, or set of regions that people had not fully seen in all of its complexity?
Oh, that's a really hard question because I don't know. I mean, that was the first show that really addressed, it wasn't just East Asia, it was Southeast Asia and South Asia. And it was quite exceptional for that time. I think it was maybe the first group show I'd seen in New York that did that. So it was, I have the catalog on my shelf. It obviously made an impact on me. And it was just a way of looking at Asia that I had never, quite honestly, had not crossed my mind. So it was a real, that kind of, that opened things up for me in a very important way. I'm not sure that people have followed, that subsequent shows have kind of followed up on that. So, but there's a whole new generations of scholars and curators, and I think we're going to see more. Um,
I hope so. I know so.
I
Um,
know, CJ, I'm counting on you.
no, I think Imelda, what was it like? I think seeing that work in at Asia Society, what was it like installing it? I want to hear the flip side of this kind of interaction.
Oh yes, my work then was I installed it at the Queen's Museum. I had a big room. It's a larger installation than this. This one is like yeah, a summary. So the one at the tradition stations, I had more baggages there and more objects too. And it was something new to the public, talking about domestic helpers' work. At that time, maybe the audience wasn't so aware of how large the expatriation of women was from the Philippines. And I think, mostly went to the Middle East, some in Canada, and a few were just starting in the United States. And it was good to bring to the attention of the audience that uh, domestic work is work, and the domestic helpers have rights which are often forgotten because they are just at home, just like even housewives' work uh, should be counted in the economy, right? Yes, I think, uh, well, in the Philippines, the government paid more attention. I should be proud to say that there's a commission on overseas work, and they paid more attention to the problems of the expatriate workers because of my exhibit. And also I encourage others to dwell on this work. In fact, when I had an exhibition of this it's a government gallery, I encourage another group to make another exhibit in another room on the same theme. And it had a larger impact because we invited people in government to view the exhibit,
Mm.
and they paid more attention. I know, well, it's been quite some years, but they did act in Congress about giving more rights. Yes, artists can really promote social change through their art, but they have to see that these people who have the power to bring in change would watch their work.
Mhm.
Yes. I think I should encourage curators also to uh, make themes for social change so that artists will be encouraged to do work that would be more contributory to this. Mhm.
Of course, of course. And I think in discussing all of this, it's interesting seeing the artist as a catalyst for change or for kind of propulsion, right? But I want to speak about a different type of context that can further cultivate that or allow that to publishing. You mentioned curators, but there are also different writers. There are also
Yes.
audiences who come to see this work, right? And
Yes.
I want to bring it back to the sense of the community or the sense of collectivity.
Oh, yes.
How has the sense of the collective changed for you over the course of decades of making, Imelda? Has it remained the same, your sense of an audience, your sense of a viewer? Um, Especially, I think about this, I think that's one question. But the second one here is, um, what remains of, let's say, in your mind, of the Filipino woman or Filipino-ness when it exists in another context, right? We mentioned like the Middle East or America, Europe, etc., Hong Kong. Um, what still, what can people, or in your mind, what still lingers or what still persists?
Hmm. Let me think. Difficult question. uh, can you say the question again in one sentence?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Sorry.
Um, I guess maybe I'll split it up into two. The
Hmm.
first is, how is your sense of a viewer or an audience, right? Kind of recipient of your work changed from when you first started making in a very particular local context, to, I think, one where your work is being seen more internationally, right? By
Oh,
different people, etc.
oh yes, yes, yes. Of course, when I made the work, I was addressing my own community, and I was glad that their minds were open to it. That yeah, they have to think up of solutions themselves. And then when I bring out this work, yes, it's quite different. For example, when I brought out the colonial mentality tablecloth, which opened the minds of the Filipinos themselves as to how, because of the colonial history, the self-esteem was put down, and instead the desire for the colonialist agenda was put in their minds. And when I bring out this work, of course, the colonialist mind will also be opened, hopefully, that we are protesting and we know the oppression that has happened with this and how the repercussions continue to happen, and history is repeating itself. So I like to think that uh, both minds of the inside and the outside, the oppressed and the oppressor, are brought to the fore and bring to a realization and come up to a solution, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so too, that sense of the um epiphany, or that sense of a realization of the profoundest sort, right? That's sort of what I think the greatest artists, the greatest thinkers, the greatest contributions, right, do for us. It makes us see the world anew, where we can't unsee it, right? And I think that's something that's so kind of powerfully inscribed into your way of making, right? We can't understand like a kind of long arc of Filipino art history without you, right? It's sort of crazy to think about. And just the remaining time that we have left, I really want to give the audience a sense of the space at Silverlens. And Eugenie, if you could talk more about how you've decided to lay things out. But Imelda, I also want to hear more about your 50-year retrospective at CCP in 2022, right? And what it means to have these two different spaces, or these two different assemblies of your work and your thinking in mind as you still work and create today.
Mm-hmm. Well, my retrospective happened in 2022 from September to December, and I had about 200 works there. coming from the years 1969 up to 22. And it was, as I mentioned, about refusal and hope. And this one at Silverlens is like a little summary, a sneak preview of what was that, because this one comes from about 45 years instead, 1982 to 23. Yes. So
Great. And Eugenie, if you could talk more about your organizing.
Yeah, so of course I had the 2022 retrospective very much on my mind, and I knew the gallery space, and it was a challenge of thinking of how to present this incredible, kind of depth and breadth of Imelda's work in a limited space, to do justice to it, a kind of précis of her, if that would be possible, of her practice. So I did think about, the 80s were, I because I saw the work, I'm in translation there will be a tomorrow mother. I saw that and it was so powerful. I just thought that work is going to go on the back wall. And then I started with that and then worked around it. Um, I realized that the work on I put across from it another panel, uh, a panel painting. And I also put the work from the other work from the 80s, Heart's Plaint next to it, just to kind of get the 80s. But this wall I call the colonial wall because it's a wall that has the picture of the Madonna and also of, so that's kind of referring to the Spanish colonization of the Philippines as a Spanish colony and the impact of Catholicism on culture, and then the American presence as the imperial presence, and it refers to Subic Bay. And so I just thought, oh, it's kind of nice to have this is kind of the colonial wall, but of course the theme of colonialism runs throughout the show. And so, in fact, the first piece, which is my wife is a domestic worker, also falls into that category. And then the colonial mentality tablecloth overtly addresses it. So that I tried to turn that into a small space about colonialism as an introduction. But these themes just run throughout the work, the kind of colonialism, the empowerment of women. And so, yeah, so the works are so multi-layered. I just wanted to put them in conversation. So the hang is a little bit intuitive. Obviously, Imelda's work, I mean, Imelda's and her colors is so vibrant. And it's something you have to experience. It's almost as though the color is something physical. And that coupled with the material she adds to the surfaces of her works create a very intense experience. So I also wanted to create an exhibition that wasn't overly crowded because it became clear to me when I was looking at her work, or I will say experiencing her work, that it looks one way in reproduction, as all work does, but it had a much more intense experiential component in person. So I wanted each work to have its own space because it occupies not just physical, but psychological, experiential space for the visitors. Yes, and it was a challenge, but I think it came out well, this pre-C, because, again, not wanting to be reductive, to do justice to this incredible career was challenging, but I think this does do justice, Imelda, and I hope you feel the same way. I know our viewers were very moved, enthusiastic by the presentation, the sense of energy, learning about Filipino history, which is new to many American visitors. I'm not even sure that many of our visitors are aware of the tie between the US and the Philippines because we're such an ahistorical nation. And so the exhibition just offers opportunities, on many different levels.
And I think just to end things, I want to hear in both of your words, what do you hope visitors to the gallery will see or understand of Imelda, even though if it's the tip of the iceberg, right? How are you hoping to be seen or recognized in the fullness of your work, or of this work rather?
Well, I'm just going to jump in and say that this exhibition, working on this exhibition at this time, so many people are thinking about the role of art and culture. What role can art and culture play in a under repressive regime? And so, as I was working on this and time progressed, I realized that so many people around the world today are thinking of that issue, and that Imelda's work offers um, kind of a model. And although it just seems so relevant to this moment in terms of content, in terms, its engagement with politics, activism, community building, but also from from an artistic point of view, its interest in craft and textiles and aspects that have long been dismissed by the male art world as craft and unworthy of attention, but which is receiving so much attention today, especially by younger artists who are finding Imelda's work extremely interesting. It's this idea of lineage. I think we tend not to understand. It's always useful to understand I find, where things come from. And I do think that Imelda's work presents another lineage for us to examine, and its relationship to things that are going on in our lives here in the US. That in turn expands our vision, our horizons about life in general around the globe. I mean, we in the States tend to be rather short-sighted and inward turning, maybe even more inward turning. And it's always good to look out at what's going on and to link yourself not only to the local, but to the global, as you've said, CJ.
Thank you for that, Eugenie. I mean, I leave the final moment for Imelda. How would you like to be seen?
Oh, I'd like to think that people can see that artists and their art can be a kind of saving grace in these dark moments of dictatorship and dark of so much global oppression. Well, in the Philippines, it's really dark days too, but it's good that we have someone very strong and abused already there in the ICC. So there's so much hope in that. And yes, art can be a saving grace of giving hope for our future. I think, I would like to think that. Thank you.
Wow, this conversation today has been such a pleasure to listen to. Thank you so much, Imelda, Eugenie, and CJ for your dialogue together. We invite those of you in the audience to submit your questions at the link in the chat so that we can turn to you next. We'll turn to you very soon. I'm going to start off the Q&A with a question of my own, Imelda. I'm curious if you have a drawing practice, and how that factors into the creation, especially of the two-dimensional works in the show.
Oh, uh, I don't really I don't draw for a guide to a painting. I'm very instinctive. my way of drawing is that I have papers and throw in things of collages there. But I don't draw how my painting would look like eventually at the end. I start by not knowing what I'm gonna end up with. I just play, and it surprises me what I end up with. But even if I draw in the abstract, that's my way. I draw in the abstract and compose in the abstract because I'm always so attuned to what's happening around me. It's just at the back of my head. I can't end my work without any social message. So, well, that's about it.
Your answer is a perfect segue to the next audience question, which is about how you know a work is finished.
Mm. How do I know when a work is finished? It's just I like it aesthetically and I have brought a message with it. Yeah, I hope that answers. I like the texture, the colors, the composition. That's what matters to me as an artist. And as a citizen, what matters is I'm able to have a message with it. Thank
Thank you
you.
for that answer, Imelda, and thank you, audience member, for that question. The next question is about, I'm going to read it. This audience member is curious to know if you've ever faced any pushback or resistance from curators or collaborators based on the content of the work and how you've navigated that.
Oh, well, the curators who don't like my work won't even look at my work, I guess, because they'd rather see works that would decorate buildings or decorate buildings and living rooms. But they are mostly the museum curators who would look at my work. And if they have themes, social themes, I get in. And I'm also lucky to be taken in exclusively by Silverlens because Silverlens knows how to respect the artist and what you really want to do and support it and would find good support for the art that I'm doing. So no worry about not getting any audience. Just do my work because my own audience are the people in the subject of my work. That's the audience that I'm serving.
Amazing. Well, our last question today is going to be from Fong. Fong, I'll pass you the mic so that you can ask.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you, Eugenie. Thank you, CJ. Thank you, Imelda. I'm sorry I missed quite a bit of it in the interview, but I will definitely listen to the whole thing as soon as tomorrow. But my question is very simple. There's a literary aspects in your work, as well as we can even say, mythological and so on. But I wonder whether you have collaborated with poets or have poets ever approached you to collaborate? Because if I'm a poet, Amanda, I would love to write poems right next to each work, really.
Oh, that's
Oh,
one.
Imelda, you have a huge, you work on books.
Well, but not poetry. But I have worked with poets, but that's not lately. Maybe, in the 80s, I had, that must be 82, with I forget now his name because he's passed on. He did some poetry based on my painting, and it was about uh, the window, woman in window. Yeah, and it was a male poet who uh, who made poetry out of it. And I am in touch with poet Kripuson and poet, he's a male, and Babeth Lolarga, who's female, but not really one-to-one correspondence on a specific art.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have conversations, yes, and I still have to analyze if this had any effect on what we have done, because the exchanges were indirect conversations.
Right. Yeah,
Yes.
if I go to the gallery, I will find out more of that collaboration, because the works is, is poetic. There's no straight, clear narrative, so I thought a poetic response will be very so fitting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm gonna bring some poet friend to see it with me, if you don't mind.
Of course.
I'm looking forward to see the show also. So thank you, Meda.
Thank you, Bill.
Congratulations, and thank you,
Thank you.
GJ. Back to you, Chloe.
Thank you, Fong, for that question. Imelda, while you were answering that question, I got one more question from the audience, if you'll have it.
Yeah.
It's from Brenda, and Brenda would like to know, is there a work whose resonance has changed for you over time or when encountered in different contexts? Or relatedly, when the larger installation now exists in a changed version, do you return to rework on your pieces?
Does she mean I rework on what I have done before?
Yes, she's asking that, yeah.
Ah, I don't think I like reworking on what is finished. I move on. I move on to another work. I don't want to repeat myself. But when themes repeat, it's because history repeats itself, maybe in different version, but there's always something socially and politically happening that I have to react to. And that's not repeating myself, but I have to make my own reaction to something new again that has come up socially and politically.
Thank you so much, Imelda, and Eugenie and CJ for this really, really luminous dialogue. It's been such a pleasure to listen to. I would like to thank the Silverlens team, especially Katie, Tammy, Nellie, Megan, and everyone there who have been just so, so supportive and helpful with making today possible. And I would also, of course, like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art, who sponsor the New Social Environment program and make conversations like this one possible. They also support our archive, where this will be uploaded shortly on YouTube. Someone in the audience had a question about that, if the recording would be available. And yes, it will be available. They all are. They're on YouTube. Um, so you'll see it very soon. If you're free on Monday at 1 p.m., join us for a conversation with Candida Alvarez and Carla Acevedo Yates on the occasion of Candida's exhibition Circle Point Hoop and Real Monsters in Bold Colors at El Museo del Barrio and Gray, respectively. And as is real tradition, you can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so, so much for joining us today. And thank you, Imelda, Eugenie, and CJ.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much,
Thank you,
everyone.
Meda.
Bye.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Thank you,
much.
Eugenie.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, Meda.
Bye.
Congratulations.
Oh,
And
thank
go
you,
see the
Fong.
show, everybody. Please go see the
Oh,
show. Thank you. Very
I,
important.
that was so brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Congratulations, Imelda from
Thank you very
Vancouver.
much. Thank
Congratulations, Amanda.
Bye.
Thank
you.
you, CJ. Thank you, Eugenie.
Thank you.
Have a